All right, I will go ahead and call to order this public meeting of the Missoula Board of County Commissioners, Thursday, May 9th at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we have a public announcement that Commissioner Strohmeyer is going to read.
Okay, we have a proclamation today related to Kids to Park Day in 2019. So whereas May 18, 2019 is the 9th Kids to Parks Day organized and launched by the National Park Trust, held annually on the third Saturday of May, and whereas Kids to Park Day empowers kids and encourages families to get outdoors and visit America's parks, public lands, and waters, and whereas we should encourage children to lead a more active lifestyle to combat issues of childhood obesity, diabetes, hypertension, and high cholesterol. And whereas Kids to Park Day will broaden children's appreciation for nature and outdoors. Now, therefore, we, the Missoula County Commissioners in the state of Montana, do hereby proclaim May 18th, 2019 as Kids to Parks Day, dated this 9th day of May, 2019.
Thank you. Any other public announcements? All right, is there any public comment on items that are not on today's agenda? Our current claims list includes claims received from April 25th to May 1st, 2019 by our office, and they total $974,870.67. And you can go online to our agenda portal and click on that and see what those claims are for. We have 3 hearings today. First, I will open the Missoula Rural Fire District Annexation Petitions hearing with a staff report.
Hi, Sam Scott with the Clerk and Recorder. So our office received 8 petitions to annex land into the Missoula Rural Fire District. The parcels included in the 8 petitions are Tract C of COS 3081 in the southwest quarter, southeast quarter of Section 101419, located at 11284 Grant Creek Road, 59808. Sunny Acres Homesite Slot 6 at 5620 Rattlesnake Drive, 59802. Tract 10 of COS 4208, located at 3101 Evans Ridge Road, 59803. Tract 6A of COS 2243 at 3282 Deer Creek Road, 59803. The remainder tract of COS 1345 at 2463 Large Camp Road, 59803. Painted Sky Phase 2, Lot 4 at 16702 Painted Sky Court, 59833. The east half of the northeast quarter of the northwest quarter of Section 10, Township 13, Range 19 West at 9 Spurlock Road, 59802. And lastly, the west half of the southwest quarter of the northwest quarter of Section 10, Township 13, North, Range 19 West at 1500 Spurlock Road. All of the petitions have been signed by the property owners who represent more than 40% of the acreage and 40% of the taxable value of the properties to be annexed, and a notice of hearing was published twice in the Missoulian. That's all I've got.
Thanks. Any questions? Okay. Is there any public comment on any of the petitions for annexation into the Missoula Rural Fire District? All right, seeing none, we will close that hearing.
Unless the other commissioners have any questions at this point, I will move that we approve the petitions received by the Clerk and Recorder's Office for parcels of land located in Missoula County to be annexed into the Missoula Rural Fire District.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks.
Do a pause. I'm just going to call. This is about that irrigation emergency.
Sure.
Just going to call back. It was
Go ahead.
the irrigation district guy calling me back.
Okay. Commissioner Slotnick will return shortly. But in the meantime, I will open the hearing for the Richards boundary line relocation with a staff report.
For the record, I'm Tim Worley with CAPS. This is a request by John Richards for a boundary line relocation. The parcels in question are in the Clearwater Junction area. Here's an area map showing some of the features of the location. It's kind of south and east of Placid Lake, south of Salmon Lake, and within a mile or two of Clearwater Junction itself on Blanchard Creek Road and fronted by Highway 200. This shows the parcels in question, and I'll outline there are 6 of them. One on the west side of Blanchard Creek Road, around 200 acres. Another parcel to the east on the east side of Blanchard Creek Road. And then 4 tracts also east of Blanchard Creek Road up in here. This tract is actually owned by Greeno Potomac Fire. Here's an aerial photo showing the tracts in question. Again, the roughly 200-acre tract is right here. Camp Utmost, a church camp, is located adjacent to that. And then if we skip over Blanchard Creek Road, here's the second tract involved in the boundary line relocation and the 4 others over here. The rest area on Highway 200 is located here, and this is Clearwater Junction itself, and here's the Clearwater River. And Highway 83, about 50 miles south of Sealy. Here are the tracts in their present configuration. Again, there are a total of 6. The proposal is to move boundary lines to end up with this. 4 tracts, or I guess it's 5 tracts in excess of 10 acres. And then the last of the 6 tracts is about 194 acres. Most boundary line relocations are reviewed administratively in our office. With this boundary line relocation, it was recommended for commissioner review due to its complexity, and the regulations allow us to do that, to send it your way. We take a look at both rebuttable presumptions with regard to these projects. There are 3 rebuttable presumptions specific to boundary line relocations, and there are a number of general evasion criteria we also took a look at, and those are outlined in your staff analysis. So let's take a look first at the rebuttable presumptions. This is excerpted straight out of the staff report. Rebuttable presumption is kind of a clunky term, but I think this helps put it into context. The use of the boundary or of the relocation of common boundaries exemption may be presumed to have been used for the purpose of evading subdivision review. That's probably a good way of looking at rebuttable presumptions. And I do need to correct one error. Again, there are 3 total rebuttable presumptions with regard to boundary line relocations. And this one, the division would result in the permanent creation of 1 or more additional lots, tracts, or parcels less than 160 acres. No new lots are being created with this boundary line relocation. So this presumption is not triggered. So none of the 3 boundary line relocation rebuttable presumptions were triggered with this application. I just needed to clarify that error. So moving on beyond rebuttable presumptions to general evasion criteria, we're essentially asking the question, is this an evasion of subdivision review? And general review criteria apply to all exemptions. So I've got a number of these criteria. I've just pulled out the ones that actually were triggered. First of all, number 1, is the claimant in the business of constructing or dividing, developing, or selling land? And yes, John is. He's in the construction business. So jumping down to criterion number 4, has the property been the subject of a scoping or pre-application meeting for a subdivision prior to application for exemption? And yes, these parcels have been the subject of a number of pre-application conferences. Moving down to criterion 5, has the claimant engaged in prior exempt transactions involving the original tract or other tracts? Yes, there have been a number of boundary line relocation approvals and also a court-ordered division. I actually think there were a couple court-ordered divisions with regard to the parcels in question. Moving down to number 6, is there a pattern of exempt transactions used by the claimant or the claimant's immediate family and or other entities having any business, economic, ownership, or other relationship with the claimant that will result in the equivalent of a subdivision without local government review? And the one that we felt really triggered this was the court-ordered division that created the small lots on the east side of Blanchard Creek Road. Moving down to criteria number 17, are there existing violations on the property that will be made worse or left unremedied by the proposed division? The health department has flagged in the past that John essentially inherited an unlicensed mobile home park when he purchased the property. And he has worked with the health department. There's been conversations over the years on how to remedy this situation, but it still is in that current status of not being licensed. It's because there are multiple mobile homes on the property. Now, I didn't mention the number of evasion criteria that were not triggered. Some of the findings that we came up with is there is not a clear development pattern with this proposal. It's not inconsistent with growth policy recommendations for density, for residential density. And this particular layout was not denied as part of a previous subdivision proposal. So in summary, staff recommends approval of this boundary line relocation. And here's your motion: that the request by John Richards to utilize the boundary line relocation exemption be approved based on the evasion criteria and rebuttable presumptions review contained in the staff analysis.
Thanks. And does the applicant wish to present?
Only if I need to.
Okay.
If you guys have any questions.
All right. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Tim or John?
Tim, or John for that matter, what happens to the rural fire tract? Is it part of the boundary line? Is that now reconfigured as far as one of these lots we're looking at?
Notice the little jog.
Can you come to the microphone so we can catch you on the record?
Okay.
Thanks.
If you notice on the top of the map, that jog right there is the fire department lot.
Okay.
That's not part of this. The fire department lot still exists there in that configuration.
Okay, got it. Thank you. And then a question for Tim. So as you're looking at this, and no need to go back through all of the history of how the court-ordered tracks were configured, but obviously that went through regardless of I guess that would have been back in OPG days probably, or OPG's recommendation that not happen. So clearly if those lots or tracks were built out today, there's some impacts on the landscape or transportation-wise, you name it, that would be associated with development on those existing tracks. When the boundary lines are relocated to create the new tracks, I'm assuming by staff's recommendation of approval that you're not seeing any additional impacts that would accrue as a result of the reconfigured tracks that would be picked up in subdivision review, for instance.
Well, the tricky balance with subdivision exemptions is that we don't go through those same criteria. So if I were to use the subdivision review criteria to compare this configuration to this configuration, we would probably have something to say on the natural environment and wildlife habitat impact front. But since we don't really have those criteria, strictly speaking, that's why we felt comfortable with supporting this. It's going from 6 tracks to 6. It's leaving a 194 acre, I guess you could almost call it a remaining tract. Yeah, I think the impacts are certainly different between the two, but we don't really have the same criteria to work with as if this were a subdivision.
So since the new tracks, newly configured tracks, at least a number of them are now fronting Highway 200, would issues related to driveway approaches and whatnot be picked up during the building permit process?
I don't know about so much approaches, more there would be a land use permit review for each, like a home on each one of these tracts. So
If I could just make
Yeah, you can come up and,
I don't believe there'll be any access to the highway where they front on the highway. Just as a matter of future course, I think there will be a court-ordered division along the highway. And we're in the process of MDT. We've entered into a settlement agreement. MDT has been stalling the settlement agreement. We now have a new judge. There was a conflict of interest with the old judge that wasn't disclosed for 2.5 or 3 years. And so it's kind of restarted the case from ground zero now, but it doesn't affect the settlement agreement. And MDT is going to end up with some additional right-of-way there. And the access won't be to the highway from these lots.
So John, is what you're saying is that there would be access to these lots would be gained by some new road that would come off of Blanchard Creek Road?
No, Tim's outlining it right there. If you can see on the map,
Okay.
it's just an easement in there.
Does that road now connect with the highway?
Well, that road's in existence, the Black Road.
Okay, I see.
yeah, this is Camp Utmost Way right here, and this is
Alright.
an easement that would be platted with the survey.
Okay. Thank you.
And Tim, when you said land use permit, I'm not familiar with that as part of this process. Can you
don't-
describe?
On unzoned lands, we have a land use permitting process. It was authorized by the Board of County Commissioners where we review for things like, is there a septic system? Are there steep slopes? Are there floodplain issues? Things like that. There's actually a county resolution that I could send you.
And
an
this is
example.
specific to unzoned land.
Right. We actually do land use review for all zoning compliance permits too. But on unzoned land, we only do the land use review since there's no zoning.
Before any actual development, there would be land use review.
That's right.
Okay.
And John would have to pull permits through Missoula County. He would go through the building division of County Public Works.
Great. All right. Thank you.
any more questions for either of them? All right, is there any public comment on the Richards boundary line relocation? Seeing none, I will close the hearing.
Tim, could you bring up the language again? I'm sure it's in here too, but. I'd make a motion that the request by John Richards to utilize the boundary line relocation exemption be approved based on the evasion criteria and rebuttable presumptions review contained in the staff analysis.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thanks. And last up, I will open the hearing for Glacier Creek Meadows Phasing Plan Extension with a staff report.
This is a request from Dale McCormick of PCI to extend the Phase 1 final plat submittal deadline for Glacier Creek Meadows subdivision, which is a major subdivision in Condon, first approved in 2011. Phase 1 consists of only 4 lots on the northeastern portion of this property, and the present Phase 1 final plat submittal deadline was April 27th, 2019. The request from the applicant is to extend this deadline to July 27th to finish some improvements in Phase 1. At least 1 calendar year is required as part of an extension, so staff's recommendation would be to extend Phase 1 to April 27th, 2020. Basis for the request is to finish Phase 1 access and to allow for county inspection of improvements and to complete the water supply for firefighting. So again, staff's recommendation is to extend the final plat submittal deadline for Phase 1 to April 27th, 2020. And the motion is that the request to extend the Phase 1 submittal deadline for Glacier Creek Meadows subdivision be approved, subject to a 1-year extension. April 27th, 2020, based on the findings of fact in the staff analysis.
Thanks. And we have the applicant's representative here, if you would like to speak.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. For the record, Dale McCormick with PCI, representing Glacier Creek Meadows LLC. I want to thank Tim for his timeliness and work on the project. Glacier Creek Meadows is a great example of a conservation design cluster development subdivision with 4.13 acres of building envelope development on a 98-acre parcel, and we're proud to finally be at the stage of recording the Phase 1 final plat. Most of the improvements for the approaches and shared driveways off Remix Road and the natural surface trail have been completed but have not had final inspections. The strategy to provide water for fire protection purposes has evolved from the initial proposal of residential fire sprinklers to having two 3,500-gallon cisterns in Phase 1 to the current proposal of creating a pond with a dry hydrant. The pond is filled by a well and will provide 127,461 gallons of water year-round, accessed via dry hydrant. This is over 4 times the amount requested by the Office of Emergency Management, who requested 30,000 gallons for the subdivision. The exciting thing about this approach to providing water for fire protection is that it becomes a resource not only for the subdivision, but also for the community of Condon. The developer is also proposing to use the water as a means to help fill the local ice skating rink in the winter as a test of the system each year. The pond is mostly constructed, but similar to the improvements on Remix Road, the pond and access road, which has been approved by Public Works and OEM, has not had a final inspection. We are requesting an extension to file the plat by July 27th, 2019, as Tim explained, and staff is recommending extending that to April 27th, 2020. And we would be fine with that too. So we ask for your support of staff's recommendation and happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thanks. Any questions for Dale or Tim?
Not sure who this, you said pond would get inspected, is that right? Did I hear you right? I may have misheard you. You said a final inspection on the pond? Or
Yes.
I didn't know such things were inspected. That's,
There's still some details with the fitting, so that the Swan Valley Emergency Services, that there's Adrian Beck wanted a more conventional fitting. I think they wanted just to be able to put a 4-inch hose in it
off you go.
rather than having to link it. And so those kinds of details.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, she's approved the system. Public Works has approved the system. But the road hasn't been constructed yet, and that needs to have a final inspection.
Okay.
And they need to, make sure that all the pumps work properly, to recirculate the water and test it with a pump truck to suck the water out and make sure that it works, I guess is what I meant.
Okay. So you said the water will be recirculated
Yes,
in this pump? Oh, that'll keep the pond from getting funky.
right. And there's a waterfall on one side of it too. So the idea is to really make it a multifunctional asset to the project.
Great. All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Any public comment on the Glacier Creek Meadows phasing plan extension? All right, I will close that hearing.
Okay, I will go ahead and make the motion. As tempting as it is to restate this in the active voice rather than passive, I'll go ahead and read it as is. I move that the request to extend the Phase 1 submittal deadline for Glacier Creek Meadow subdivision be approved, subject to a 1-year extension, April 27, 2020, based on the findings of fact in the staff analysis.
I'll second that, and there we go.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
I almost made a joke about the passive voice, but I stopped myself.
Is there any other business to come before the commission? Oh, go ahead.
There's more.
John Richards. Hopefully you will see a proposal for removal of the junk trailer house at the refuge district in the next week or so. We've been working on this since last fall to get it out of there. So somebody abandoned a trailer up by the refuge district. at the dump site at Sealy. And it's about to fall over onto the fence of the auto graveyard that the county owns. So hopefully you'll see that in the next few days or week. But we want to get it out of there. The sooner it's out of there, the less chance there is of the fence getting destroyed. So
Great.
another question I had is on the extension you just did, that was for phase 1. Does that leave all of the other phases at the same time? So,
Yes, it only extended phase 1. The other phases did not move.
okay, because I have an 8 lot at Clearwater Junction that I want to propose an extension on, but it would be all the phases just moving back farther. So,
I think people do that as well at times, Tim, right?
and we haven't made that proposal. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yes,
Thank you.
thanks. Any other business? All right, we will adjourn. Thanks.